That the reason that women do it is that they're pursuing a dual mating strategy. That is, they're trying to get investment from one guy, like the good dads, but good genes from another guy.
Oh, wow.
And so it's
But is there any research done on what type of mate a woman is likely to cheat on?
Well, that's a good question. So there's been some, and it's not conclusive, but basically the only way this could work, and I have to back up just a second on that, we know that affairs are very costly for women. So if discovered, they result in infidels, result in violence. Sometimes they result in killing, getting to the killing. I don't know if we want to get into that maybe later in our conversation. The only way it would work, though, is if getting back to your original question, is if there's a large discrepancy between the woman's regular partner and her affair partner in terms of the quality of his genes. And so what these good genes, dual mating strategy theorists propose is that there are certain markers of good genetic quality. They hypothesized masculine features, and there's a logic behind that. They hypothesized symmetrical features. So we are a bilaterally symmetrical species, so normal development, we have, our hands, our arms, our legs grow, more or less symmetrically. But there are things that cause deviations from symmetry. So mutations, so genetic mutations can cause deviations. Diseases can cause asymmetries, and environmental insults in a variety of ways. And so what the good genes theorists argue is that if the male is very symmetrical, then that's a marker that he's not experienced a history of disease or environmental insults, or a high mutation load, or has what they call a developmental system that's very kind of impervious to these insults. So even though they've suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, they still maintain that symmetry. Well, I think there are problems with that. But anyway, back to backtrack a second, why I changed my mind. So I used to advocate this. Well, it's logically plausible. But I started to doubt it, and I started to doubt it for two reasons. One is some replications, some larger scale replications of the work started to fail to replicate the original findings. So what they did is, how did they test this? What they looked at is, do women change their preferences when they're ovulating? So because it's only in that narrow window of ovulation that she's going to be getting the good genes. So what they looked at is women's normal mate preferences, and they tracked them over the ovulation cycle, and do they change to prefer more masculine, more symmetrical features when they're ovulating, and then go back to their normal preferences. And the initial studies suggested, yes, they do. Initial studies suggested that when women have affairs, it tends to coincide with when they're ovulating, and some other things like that. When I started to look at the literature about women who were having affairs and the reasons that they're having affairs and the nature of the affairs, there are things that cropped up like this. 79%, one study found 79% of women fell in love with or became emotionally involved with her affair partner. And to me, this is exactly the opposite of what you'd want if you're trying to pursue that dual mating strategy idea. You want to get the good genes and then forget about the guy, and so as not to jeopardize your investment from the regular partner. And so it's a design feature that's counter to that notion.
Affairs happen in all cultures.
Yeah, affairs happen in all cultures, and so a competing hypothesis about why, and this is the one I'm currently putting my money on, if there's a horse race, called the mate switching hypothesis. And this is the notion that women who are in relationships where the relationship is going south Perhaps the partner starts out looking promising but has failed to live up to his promise. Perhaps he becomes an alcoholic or a drug addict or loses his job or starts abusing her, starts beating her up. That women use affairs as a mate-switching device, either to divest herself of her regular partner, or to trade up in the mating market to someone who's more desirable, or to make it easier to transition back into the mating market on the assumption that she'll be able to find someone more desirable out there. And so there's at least a fair amount of circumstantial evidence that supports the mate switching hypothesis, like the one I just mentioned. Women, with 79% of women becoming emotionally involved or falling in love with their partner, this suggests, it's not just, I'm seeking transient attention, as you mentioned. That some women might do it for that, of course. But it suggests that they're forming a long-term attachment to this other guy rather than the regular partner.